Max charged through the hospital corridor with a fierce determination that left everyone in shock. A passing doctor dropped his clipboard as the large German shepherd zipped by, his nails clacking loudly on the polished floor. One of the security guards gave chase, but Max had already turned the corner. He was fast, focused, and completely undeterred by the chaos erupting around him. Down the hallway, a nurse named Clara had just exited the pediatric intensive care unit. She turned at the sound of barking and was stunned to see Max charging toward her. She barely had time to react before he flew past her, brushing her scrubs with his tail. "Someone stop that dog!" Someone yelled behind her, but Max didn't stop. He reached the double doors of the PICU. They were secured by a keypad. But as luck would have it, or perhaps something more, the doors opened just as a technician exited. Max slipped through before they shut again. Inside, Emily sat with her hand on Lily's arm, her eyes closed in silent prayer. The room had been so quiet, she could hear every beep from the monitor. But then came the noise, first distant, then closer, barking, footsteps, shouting. She turned toward the door just in time to see it slam open. Max burst into the room like a lightning bolt. His eyes immediately locked on Lily, and his body moved with purpose. Without hesitation, he jumped onto the foot of the bed, careful not to disturb any wires, and crawled slowly toward her head. Emily gasped. "Max?" He let out a soft, whimpering bark in response. For a moment, it was as if time stopped. Emily's tears returned instantly as Max gently laid his head on Lily's chest, his ears flattening. He gave a quiet whine and began licking her hand. Two nurses rushed in behind him, followed by a security officer. "Ma'am, we need to get the dog out of here." But Emily raised her hand to stop them. "No, wait." The nurse hesitated. "Ma'am, he can't be in here. Please," Emily said, her voice trembling. "Just give him a second." Max nudged Lily's fingers with his nose again and licked them a second time. He whined deeply, his whole body pressed protectively against her. Everyone in the room stared, not knowing what to say. Then it happened. Lily's pinky finger twitched. At first, Emily thought it was a trick of the light. Her breath caught in her throat. She leaned forward, watching closely. Max licked her hand again. This time, her fingers moved more than a twitch. It was a definite shift. "Oh my God," Emily whispered. She moved. The nurse quickly rushed the monitor. Her heart rate just changed. "It's rising slightly, but it's a definite spike." The room exploded into motion. Another nurse pressed the emergency button. More staff poured in, pushing equipment and calling for Dr. Reynolds. Max remained on the bed, silent now, watching Lily's face with total focus. Emily cupped her daughter's cheeks. "Lily? Can you hear me?" Lily's eyelids fluttered. Just for a second, then again. This time, they stayed open barely. Her gaze was unfocused, but it was there. Emily gasped. A sob escaped her lips. "Lily, sweetheart." Dr. Reynolds rushed into the room seconds later, out of breath and wide-eyed. "What's going on?" The nurse pointed to the monitor. "She's responding." She opened her eyes. Movement. Vitals are improving. Dr. Reynolds stared at Lily, then at Max, who hadn't moved an inch. He looked at Emily, who was now crying into her daughter's shoulder. No one in that room could explain what they had just witnessed. But one thing was clear, Lily wasn't gone. And somehow, Max had known all along. Dr. Reynolds stood frozen for a moment, his eyes locked on the monitor. Numbers danced on the screen, subtle but undeniable. Lily's vitals were shifting. The same girl he had gently advised Emily to let go was now showing signs of life. All because of the sudden appearance of a dog. Max remained on the bed, unmoving but alert, His tail thumped once when Lily's eyelids twitched again. No one dared remove him. The room had become still again, but not with sadness. This time, it was awe. Every person present felt it. Something extraordinary had just happened. Emily leaned close to Lily's face. "Sweetheart, can you hear me?" she whispered. Lily's lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. Her fingers curled again, this time more deliberately. Her hand shifted closer to Max, resting lightly against his ear. Max responded with a soft bark and a gentle lick. His eyes never leaving her. Dr. Reynolds moved forward and examined her eyes with a flashlight. Her pupils reacted. "She's trying to track light," he said under his breath. "This wasn't possible a week ago." The head nurse stepped back. "Doctor, should we prepare a new neurological scan?" He nodded slowly, still dazed. "Yes. And full vitals, blood work, everything. Cancel any end-of-life orders immediately." Emily turned to him with teary eyes. "What does this mean?" Dr. Reynolds took a breath. "It means your daughter just gave us a reason to hope." Down the hallway, the hospital buzzed with the news. Doctors whispered. Nurses checked monitors twice. Patients' families stood in doorways, curious about the sudden energy radiating from the pediatric floor. Word of the German Shepherd's dramatic arrival spread fast, and a few staff members even checked the security footage in disbelief. There it was, Max charging through the lobby, dodging people, finding the exact elevator, and bolting to the correct room. It looked like something out of a movie. Meanwhile, the nurse who had first seen Max outside the hospital was now on the phone with security. "No tags, no chip, and no collar," she said. "But the girl's mother says his name is Max, and he's their family dog. Apparently, he ran here from across town." The head of hospital security raised an eyebrow. "Ran here on his own?" She nodded. "Straight to the pediatric ICU." Back in Lily's room, Max finally shifted and curled beside her. Nurses came in and out, carefully navigating around him. Every few minutes, someone checked her responses. Her eyes opened again, longer this time. Her breathing deepened. She even turned her head slightly when Emily spoke to her. Dr. Reynolds had never seen anything like it. In his office, he reviewed Lily's previous scans. The last one, done 10 days earlier, had shown minimal brain activity. Her EEG had been nearly flat. But now, he watched a live feed from her current monitor. The brainwaves were weak but active, a whisper of consciousness coming back to life. He tapped his pen against the desk and muttered, "This doesn't happen. Not like this." Still, there was no denying it. Later that evening, Max remained in the room, having won an exception to hospital policy. The staff brought in a dog bed and water bowl. Emily sat beside her daughter, holding her hand, while Max slept beside her with one paw resting protectively on Lily's arm. "I don't know how you knew," she whispered to him, "but thank you." For the first time in months, Emily allowed herself to smile. Hope had walked back into their lives, on 4 legs and with a heart full of love. The hospital buzzed like a stirred beehive. Nurses from other floors found excuses to pass through the pediatric ICU just to catch a glimpse of the dog who had seemingly pulled a child back from the edge. Max lay calmly beside Lily, eyes half closed, but alert. He hadn't left her side once since he'd arrived. Emily sat beside the bed, her hand resting on Lily's. There had been more movement, slight gestures of the fingers and toes. Lily's breathing had improved, and her eyes stayed open longer each time. She wasn't fully conscious, but something inside her was fighting to return. Dr. Reynolds entered the room with a team of neurologists and technicians. "Let's keep this low stress," he said. "Minimal disturbance. We just need a baseline scan to see what's happening." Emily looked up nervously. "Will she feel anything?" No, the doctor assured her gently. It's non-invasive. We're scanning for brain activity. As they wheeled in the portable EEG machine, Max stood up. He watched every move. Tail stiff, protective. When one technician stepped too close to Lily's head, Max let out a quiet growl. Dr. Reynolds raised his hand. It's okay. Let the dog stay where he feels safe. We don't want to agitate either of them. The team worked around Max, gently placing electrodes on Lily's scalp. The screen came to life with faint signals. At first, the lines were shallow, almost flat. But as Max stepped closer, nuzzling against Lily's arm, the lines on the monitor began to shift. Wait, said one of the neurologists. Did you see that spike? The technician adjusted the wires. It jumped just now, right when the dog touched her. Another spike, then another. Dr. Reynolds leaned forward, his eyes wide. She's responding to him. Emily covered her mouth. You mean her brain is reacting when Max is near? Exactly, the doctor said. His presence is triggering something. Just then, Lily's lips moved. Not much. A gentle parting, a tremble like a whisper on the verge of being spoken. Max whimpered and licked her hand. A soft sound escaped Lily's throat. Emily froze. Lily? It was barely audible, but it was there. A faint murmur, a breath caught between sleep and speech. The monitor beeped again, showing another rise. Inactivity. The team stepped back. She's trying, Emily whispered. She's fighting. Dr. Reynolds turned toward the others. I want a full MRI first thing in the morning. Cancel all discharge plans. She stays under observation. And someone get behavioral therapy in here. I want them to start mapping interactions with the dog. After the team left, Emily sat back, holding Max's face in her hands. You brought her back, she said through tears. You knew she wasn't gone. Max wagged his tail and laid his head back on Lily's shoulder. Later that night, a new nurse named Teresa entered the room to replace an bag. She paused at the door, uncertain. Is it okay if I come in? Emily nodded. Just move slowly around him. As Teresa worked quietly, she glanced at Max. I've never seen anything like this. I used to work in palliative care. Sometimes you feel something still there, even when the machines say otherwise. Emily nodded. I felt it too, but nobody believed me. Teresa smiled. Well, you've got one very convincing dog. As the nurse left, the room grew still again. But this time, it wasn't filled with grief. It was quiet with expectation. Something miraculous had begun. Outside the room, staff members gathered to review the EEG printouts. More specialists were called. Conversations shifted from how to say goodbye to how to prepare for a recovery. And in the center of it all, a loyal German shepherd stood guard beside the little girl no one had expected to wake up. By morning, the hospital was in a state of quiet fascination. Overnight reports confirmed what few dared to believe the day before. Lily's brain activity was improving. No one could explain it. Her vitals had stabilized. Her reflexes had slightly strengthened. And most astonishing of all, her eyelids had fluttered open twice during the night. Each time, Max had been right beside her. Dr. Reynolds stood in front of a group of specialists reviewing Lily's latest EEG. It's subtle, but the activity is there, he said, tapping the graph. This region was completely inactive in her last scan. Now we're seeing signs of sensory response. A younger doctor leaned in. And it started right after the dog showed up? Reynolds nodded, still in disbelief. He didn't just show up. He interrupted what was supposed to be a final procedure. He made contact, and everything changed. Meanwhile, in Lily's room, Emily had barely slept. She sat in the chair beside the bed, watching her daughter's face as if afraid she might miss another moment of awareness. Max remained curled beside Lily, lifting his head any time someone new entered. His presence had become more than a comfort. It was like he was part of her recovery. A therapist named Janet arrived mid-morning, carrying soft fabrics and small toys designed to stimulate touch and sound. She paused at the door, eyeing Max. Cautiously, Emily smiled. He's harmless. Unless you're trying to move Lily without his permission. Janet laughed nervously. Noted. As she sat beside the bed, Janet began speaking softly to Lily. Hi, sweetheart. My name's Janet. I'm just going to help you wake up, okay? She placed a soft piece of velvet in Lily's hand and gently guided her fingers over it. Do you feel that? She asked. Lily didn't respond, but Max stood up and began to pace the room. Emily watched closely. Then, as Janet tried a small rattle near Lily's ear, Max let out a sharp bark. Lily's eyes flickered open. Emily stood up so fast the chair fell backward. Lily! Janet froze. Did she respond to that sound? Max barked again, just once, and this time Lily's eyes stayed open. She blinked slowly, then turned her head a few inches toward the sound. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. She's hearing you, she whispered. She's really hearing you. Janet leaned in, her voice calm but excited. Lily, can you squeeze my hand? The room fell into silence. Max stepped closer, nudging Lily's arm gently with his nose. And then it happened. Lily's hand tightened, just barely, but enough. Janet gasped. She's responding. Dr. Reynolds entered, just in time to witness the moment. He froze at the doorway, staring at Lily as her eyes fluttered again, and her hand squeezed Janet's finger once more. Get the MRI team ready now, he said quickly. We're not waiting another minute. As staff scrambled to prepare the transport, Emily leaned over her daughter and kissed her forehead. You're so brave, she whispered. We're right here. Max and we're not leaving. Max let out a low, reassuring whine and pressed his head against Lily's chest. That afternoon, the MRI results came in. The scans showed measurable improvement. Blood flow to critical areas of Lily's brain had increased. The doctors couldn't explain it. The original scans had shown severe trauma, the kind from which few children recovered. But now, the very regions responsible for speech and movement were flickering with activity. Dr. Reynolds sat at his desk staring at the images, shaking his head. This defies everything I've studied. One of the interns leaned forward. So, what do we do now? Dr. Reynolds replied softly, almost to himself. We stop preparing for death and start preparing for life. And just outside the window of Lily's room, Max sat with his ears perked, watching, waiting, and ready for what came next. Dr. Reynolds sat at his office desk long after the others had gone home, the glow of Lily's updated MRI still on the screen. He had stared at dozens, hundreds of brain scans over his career. He knew what recovery looked like. He knew what miracles didn't look like. Yet everything about Lily's progress challenged that. He tapped his pen against his notebook and looked down at his scribbled notes. The timeline was undeniable. No movement, no awareness, nearly flat EEGs until Max appeared. Since then, Lily's activity had steadily improved with every passing hour. The scans were clear, the changes measurable. He closed the laptop and stood. There were too many unanswered questions. Meanwhile, down in room 207, Emily sat cross-legged on the small couch, watching Max as he rested beside Lily. Nurses came in every 2 hours to check her vitals, but most of the team now moved with quiet reverence around the dog. He had become part of the room. No one tried to remove him anymore. A young intern entered with a clipboard. Excuse me, Miss Rivers? Emily looked up, tired but alert. Yes? I've been asked to confirm some information. About the dog. Does Max have any special training? Emily blinked. Training? Yes, like from a service program? K9? Rescue unit? She shook her head slowly. No, at least not that I was told. I adopted him when Lily was 2. He was already a few years old. Came from a retired breeder in northern Michigan. The intern made a note. Any identification? Records? Microchip? Emily frowned. He didn't have a chip. Just a paper collar with a name and address. Why? The intern hesitated. There are questions being raised. Some of the behavior Max is showing. It's extremely rare. Almost too precise to be coincidence. Emily stood up. You think he was trained? That he's not just a regular dog? I don't know, ma'am, the intern said. But someone's looking into it. Dr. Reynolds asked for Max's background. To be pulled if possible. That night, Emily dug through her old storage bin in the corner of Lily's room. She found the adoption paperwork, wrinkled and stained. The listed name of the former owner was a retired Army vet named Harold Collins. She hadn't thought about him in years. He had been quiet kind, said Max was loyal but stubborn. You'll know when he chooses you, he'd said at the time. Emily remembered how Max had bonded to Lily the moment they met. Not over days or weeks, but instantly. As if something deep in him had been waiting. The next morning, Dr. Reynolds met with Emily and reviewed the updated EEGs. There's more progress, he said, his tone still tinged with disbelief. She's not out of the woods, but we're seeing rapid developments, especially after certain sensory triggers. Emily glanced at Max, who had perked his head the moment the doctor entered. What kind of triggers? His bark, his presence, his touch, Reynolds replied. We've compared neural spikes. Max stimulates parts of her brain that weren't active before. He paused, lowering his voice. I've never seen anything like this. That dog is doing what medicine couldn't. Later that day, a local reporter somehow caught wind of the story. A nurse, probably meaning no harm, had shared a photo of Max lying beside Lily. Within hours, the hospital began receiving calls. News vans parked outside. Journalists requested interviews. A miracle dog that had stopped a child's euthanasia? The headlines practically wrote themselves. Dr. Reynolds quickly issued a statement declining press access, insisting the patient's health came first. But the attention only grew. Behind the scenes, the hospital board began asking questions. Was there liability in letting a dog remain in a sterile room? Or policies being broken? But none of that mattered to Lily, or to Max. That evening, for the first time, Lily opened her eyes and held them open. She stared directly at her mother and smiled. The hospital's pediatric. I see, you had never seen anything like it. Nurses walked with lighter steps. Volunteers brought extra flowers. Visitors peeked down the hallway, hoping to catch a glimpse of the now famous dog who had defied medical expectations. But inside room 207, the miracle was not in the headlines. Or the whispers. It was in Lily's smile. She was still weak, still barely able to speak, but every hour brought something new. A flicker of recognition, a slow movement of the hand, a whisper of a word. Each moment was another thread sewing her back into the world, and Max never left her side. When Lily opened her eyes for longer stretches, Max would perk up and wag his tail. When she whispered his name, barely audible, breathy, and soft, he would nuzzle closer, as if understanding every syllable. Dr. Reynolds kept a quiet, steady watch. He wasn't a man easily shaken, but Lily's case had done something. To him, it wasn't just the improbability of her awakening. It was the pattern, the strange but consistent connection to the dog. By the end of the week, a new behavioral neurologist, Dr. Sarah Keller, had been brought in to assist. She's responding to familiar stimuli, she explained, standing beside Lily's bed. But the dog seems to be activating something deeper, emotional memory, perhaps even early sensory recovery. It's not unheard of, but this is well beyond anything I've observed. Emily smiled as she brushed Lily's hair. He's been her shadow since she could walk. Dr. Keller knelt down beside Max, observing him. He's unusually calm for a German Shepherd. His reactions are measured, not random. Do you mind if I run a behavior profile? Emily nodded. Whatever helps. Later that afternoon, Keller brought her findings to Dr. Reynolds. I did a pattern analysis, she said, handing him a folder. This dog is advanced response behaviors. He recognizes over 20 commands without verbal cues. He predicts emotional shifts. He even redirects attention, classic signs of elite service dog training. Reynolds narrowed his eyes. But Emily said he wasn't trained. He was, Keller said firmly. And not just casually. This is military or emergency response level. Reynolds leaned back in his chair. Then we need to find out who trained him. And why no one knew. Emily, meanwhile, had gone home for the first time in over a week to check on her house. She brought Max's old crate, some of Lily's favorite clothes, and a file she hadn't looked at in years, the adoption paperwork. She sat on her living room floor, flipping through the yellowed pages. There it was again. Maximus, male. German Shepherd, approx. 4 years old. Transferred from retired handler Harold Collins, Ann Arbor, Michigan. Her hand paused on a small folded note attached to the back. She had never noticed it before. In faded blue ink. It read, Maximus is more than a dog. He saved lives. He will know what to do when the time comes. Her heart skipped. She returned to the hospital immediately and handed the note to Dr. Reynolds. He stared at it in silence. Harold Collins? He said aloud. That name sounds familiar. Emily nodded. I think he used to train dogs for search and rescue. Maybe even the army. Dr. Reynolds set down the paper. If this dog is who we think he is, he may have been trained to detect trauma or even signs of consciousness in unresponsive patients. They both looked toward Lily's room, where Max lay curled at her feet. The story had already reached national news. Photos of Max and Lily appeared on news feeds. Offers to interview Emily flooded in. The hospital declined them all, but the pressure was mounting. Behind closed doors, administrators debated policy exceptions. Lawyers reviewed liability clauses. But Dr. Reynolds pushed back. That dog saved her. We're not removing him. That evening, Lily whispered her second word, Mom. And then her third, Max. The hospital could no longer contain the story. Despite efforts to keep things quiet, photos of Max lying beside Lily had gone viral. Headlines flooded social media. Miracle dog wakes comatose girl. German Shepherd stops euthanasia in shocking twist. And doctors stunned by dog's role in recovery. The public was mesmerized, and now the pressure was on the hospital to either confirm or deny the unbelievable story. Inside room 207, Emily tried to shield Lily from the noise outside the window. Media vans were now parked along the street. Reporters camped by the entrance. Nurses had to use side doors to avoid questions. But in that quiet hospital room, the only thing that mattered was Lily's voice, soft, shaky, and full of new life. Max, she whispered for the third time that morning. Her hand resting gently on his back, Max responded with a gentle bark, licking her hand and pressing his nose into her palm. Each time she called his name, he seemed to shine with renewed energy, as though her recovery was also healing something inside him. Emily turned to Dr. Reynolds. We have to find out where he came from. Not just who owned him, but what he was. Trained for, Reynolds nodded. I've already made some calls. By midday, he received a callback from a contact at a military canine archive. When he mentioned the name Harold Collins, the woman on the other end went silent for a moment. "Dr. Reynolds," she said finally. "Harold Collins was one of the top trainers in the U.S. Army's Trauma Detection Unit. He worked with dogs, specifically trained to identify vital signs in unconscious soldiers on the battlefield. The dogs could detect things even medics sometimes missed." "Could one of those dogs detect consciousness?" Reynolds asked. "If anyone's dog could," she replied, "it was Harold's." Reynolds sat in stunned silence. "Do you have the dog's tattoo, ID, or chip number?" she asked. Reynolds explained that Max had no chip and had been adopted. "With only basic paperwork, she sighed. "That sounds like Collins. He retired early and released his last dog to a private home quietly. Wouldn't surprise me if Max is that dog. If so, you're witnessing something incredibly rare." Reynolds hung up the phone and immediately returned to Lily's room. Emily was reading a picture book aloud while Max rested beside her daughter's bed. "I have an answer," he said gently. "And it changes everything." He explained what he had learned. Emily sat in stunned silence as he told her about Harold Collins, the trauma detection training, and the possibility that Max had been specially conditioned to detect signs of life others couldn't see. Emily pressed a hand to her mouth. "So all this time, he knew Lily was still in there?" Reynolds nodded. "He likely sensed it long before we did." Emily looked down at Max with tears in her eyes. "You never gave up on her." Outside the hospital, administrators were debating a response strategy. Some feared lawsuits. Others saw the potential for a public image campaign. But Reynolds refused to let policy drown out what truly mattered. He called an emergency board meeting and spoke plainly. "Max is not a liability. He is the reason that girl is alive. You want to draft a statement? Tell the world the truth. For once, let a hospital headline be about hope." The board reluctantly agreed. That evening, the hospital released an official statement confirming that a service-trained German Shepherd had played a significant role in a young patient's unexpected neurological improvement. The story exploded. TV interviews, medical journals, and documentaries requested access. The hospital declined all press visits for now. Inside the room, Lily smiled as Emily played soft music on her phone. Max, sensing the shift, walked over to the bed and nudged her once. Lily lifted her arm slowly, shakily, and wrapped it around his neck. It wasn't strength yet, but it was love, and it was real. Spring sunlight streamed gently through the window of room 207, casting soft golden light across Lily's bed. The beeping monitors were still there, but the tones were calmer now, more rhythmic, less urgent. Lily sat upright with pillows supporting her, her eyes bright, her cheeks fuller with color. Her voice, though still faint, carried more clearly each day. "Good morning, Max," she said. Max responded with a quiet bark, wagging his tail and placing his head gently in her lap. Emily stood nearby, watching the moment as if afraid it might vanish if she blinked. But this wasn't a dream anymore. Lily was awake, healing, and slowly finding her voice again. In the weeks following the official statement, the hospital had turned into a symbol of something far greater than medicine. Emails flooded in from across the world, messages of encouragement, wonder, and stories of people who had experienced something similar. Letters from parents, veterans, and even former service dog handlers arrived for Lily and Max. But through all the attention, Emily refused interviews. She had one focus: her daughter's recovery. On the hospital lawn, staff organized a private ceremony. It wasn't for the media or the cameras. It was for the team who had fought to believe, for the nurses who'd stayed late, and for the dog, who had seen what no one else had. They called it Max's Day. Dr. Reynolds stood at the small podium with Lily in a wheelchair beside him, Max proudly sitting at her feet. The crowd of doctors, nurses, therapists, and hospital staff stood quietly, many with tears already in their eyes. "There are things in medicine we can explain," Reynolds said. "And then there are moments that remind us we don't know everything. That healing doesn't always come from machines or charts. Sometimes it comes on four legs, with fur and a bark, and a love so strong it pulls someone back to us." He looked down at Lily, who reached out to pat Max's head. "Max didn't just save Lily," Reynolds continued. "He reminded all of us that hope doesn't have to come with a reason." The staff clapped softly. Max barked once, as if sensing. The applause was for him. Later that afternoon, as the sun began to dip behind the hospital, Lily took her first few steps down the hallway, holding tightly to a walker. Emily walked beside her, and Max matched their pace without needing a leash. "Doing amazing, sweetheart," Emily said, tears in her eyes. Lily nodded. "I just want to go home. And Max needs to sleep in my room again." "You bet he does," Emily smiled. That evening, as they packed Lily's things to be discharged the next day, Emily found herself staring at Max. He was stretched out on the hospital floor, content and peaceful. She knelt down and wrapped her arms around him. "I'll never understand how you knew," she whispered, "but you gave her back to me." Max licked her cheek and returned to his watchful position beside the bed. The next morning, as the wheelchair rolled through the hospital lobby, staff members clapped and waved. Balloons floated. Nurses cried. Dr. Reynolds stood by the exit with a folded paper in his hand, a printed copy of Lily's first clean EZ. He handed it to Emily. "It's official," he said. "Full neural response. She's going to make it." Emily took the paper with trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered. Reynolds smiled. "Thank him." Lily turned toward Max, ready to go home. Max stood, tail wagging, and trotted beside her chair all the way to the car. And as the doors closed and they drove away, no one could forget the miracle that began with a dog who refused to give up, and a little girl who had more life left than anyone ever imagined.